Good morning. Welcome to the Adult Bible class. We are once again today looking through church history, and we are getting ready. This should be our last lesson before the Council of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea being probably the most important event in the history, early history at least, of the church, up till probably the Reformation. This Council of Nicaea that we'll be looking at the next time we gather is just absolutely earth-shattering in the church and in the Roman Empire at large. So, but in order to get to Nicaea, we've had to lay down kind of several different threads of things that have gone on in church history. We've looked at the way the Christian church changed its organizational structure and kind of matched what was going on in the Roman Empire with hierarchy of leaders going down. We looked at the way that the church began to use the language of the culture to describe the principles of Scripture, and then moved beyond that to actually using the principles of secular reasoning to try to understand Scripture, and then began to look for this allegorical or deeper meaning in Scripture. Persecution on the church had brought about several difficult controversies to try to answer, as far as what does it mean to be in the church and saved, and how do you actually repent or show penance, or these ideas that we've discussed leading up to that. And the final kind of thread in this tapestry that I want to talk about is the political situation in the Roman Empire that was absolutely necessary and really dramatic as far as what happened in 325 AD when Constantine called together the bishops, the Christian bishops from around the world to discuss this heresy of Arianism. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. There are just a tremendous number of parallels between what happened politically in Rome and as they were approaching the fall of Rome, and what happened in like pre-World War II Germany before they fell, and honestly what's happening in our own nation, the way people are looking at culture, and hopefully you'll see kind of the way the leadership, the empires of Rome responded to these challenges and what was happening in society, and be able to recognize that even in our world today. So that's today's topic. This political situation and sacralism entering the church is absolutely essential. It is the persecution of Christians, the setting up of Diocletian, which sets up Constantine, which absolutely moves the church into a sphere of secular world leadership that is not assigned by God to the church. The church is assigned to individuals and hearts and the kingdom of God until the Lord returns to be the ruler over all. So that's where we're at. We'll pray and we'll get started in the lesson today. Father, I thank you for preserving our nation 21 years ago today. Dramatic impact and a dramatic change in our U.S. worldview as far as how we understood ourselves and the nations around us. Father, I ask that as the church we would respond to that, not with nationalism, but with eagerness to share the gospel, to eagerly make disciples of all nations, Lord, that our hearts wouldn't be filled with hate, but a fervent desire to declare the goodness of your Son and of his love for us and of his love for the whole world. If they should but bend the knee, should just invite you to be the Lord over their life, Father. I ask this study today would help us to understand when we read events in Scripture, when we read prophetic events like the book of Revelation, Lord, about how your church has faced similar events in the past to what we face today, Lord, that we would be calmed and be set firm and not fervent about over realizing the prophetic fulfillment, Lord, that we would put our hope in you and your return and not our ability to foresee or predict. And just all these ways that studying your word as it moved in your bride, in the church, colors the way we view the world today. And I ask this in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. All right, a couple of reading resources. Once again, I want to commend to you the History of Rome podcast by Mike Duncan. We are going to extremely quickly generalize 100 years of the Roman Empire. And I'm just going to give you a few little details. I'm going to make statements like hyperinflation. If you want to understand the intricacies of what happened in Rome and really to be able to look at the way we view money today and the way they dealt with money then in a little bit more detail, I highly encourage you to check out that. You don't have to watch anything. You can put in the headphones. We need a lawnmower for September, so you can listen to those podcasts while you mow the lawn here for us. So great opportunity. Also, it was a busy week. I still have paint on my hands. I think there's still paint drying in the Price Library. We got the key for it hanging right there. So Brother Billy and Sister Elaine will get to be the first to walk through. So I only had time to read about 4 chapters of one book this week, and that book that I chose was How Rome Fell, Death of a Superpower by Adrian Goldsworthy. Goldsworthy. What a name. I would love to have grown up with that last name, right? I'd have been singing that MC Hammer song, Can't Touch This, right? Goldsworthy. And then again, Ryan Reeves. I actually have borrowed several of the slides from Ryan Reeves's presentation at Gordon Cromwell Theological Seminary for use today. So hopefully I don't get in trouble for that. I'm giving you credit for it. They're your slides. They were just excellent. So why reinvent the wheel? He actually does better because he animates his, and check him out. Overview. We've got 6 steps we're going to take today as we look at the political situation in Rome that led up to Nicaea. The first is the situation in 235. How did we get to where? How did Rome get to where they were? I'm just going to kind of use like the present tense, but I'm talking about the past, right? Just to kind of get us there. We're gonna talk about and reflect on the year of 6 emperors, the rise of 3 empires in Rome. This united empire actually gets divided, and we're going to look at the man who brought things back together, Diocletian, and we're going to look at the steps he took and the way of thinking and the propaganda and the persecution that he used to bring the empire back together, his retirement, and what happened after he retired in 305 AD and how that affected the empire and kind of put him back in a situation similar to 235. And then Constantine comes along, and how Constantine is going to do a lot of the similar things that Diocletian did, but for Constantine, instead of pagan worship, it's going to be the Christian church that is the kind of the foundation or the thing that he looks forward to it. So in 235 AD, the Roman Empire spread all the way out to Spain, down through North Africa, all the way to the east, all the way down the Suez, well, there was no canal there, but the Red Sea, across into Persia, up through Palestine. They cut across up to the far eastern end of the Black Sea. If you don't know, the Black Sea is this area right there. And this little tiny cut right here is called the Bosphorus Straits. It is a hugely important place in the world. In fact, that is where Constantine is going to move his empire capital, Constantinople. So they included all of Turkey, And they moved through all of Greece, of course, all of Italy, and all the way up to the southern part of Brittany. The northern part that we today called Scotland was ruled by the Picts. And actually, there was an emperor named Hadrian. You may have heard of Hadrian's Wall. If not, Google, fantastic resource, incredibly interesting. He just built a big giant wall, basically cut the island of Britain in half because they couldn't defeat the Picts to the north. You've seen the freedom. What's that guy's name with the blue face? William Wallace, Braveheart, right? Like that kind of fighting, right, was just more than the Romans could overcome. So this is the size of the empire that was happening. And out to the east of the Roman Empire was an empire known as the Sassanids. The Sassanids. Well, the Sassanids began to look at the size of the Roman Empire. They looked at the rulers of Rome, and they decided the situation is ripe for us to invade and take over kind of eastern Turkey. They actually pushed their way all the way past Antioch. Antioch is right here at the top, right where the red and the green come together. So they had taken, which was a hugely important city. We remember biblically, it was Paul and Peter. These guys started their missionary journeys from Antioch, right? Paul and Barnabas, it was there that they went down to the Jerusalem Council. So much important stuff happened, and the Roman Empire lost control of that region of Antioch. So in 235 AD, the emperor of Rome, a man named of Alexander Severus, decides to go to battle against the Goths. Now the Goths are to the north. Actually, I'll show you the Gothic Empire here. The Goths are to the north, and the Goths began moving down through the western edge of the Black Sea over there next to the Alemanni and invading the Roman Empire. And so Alexander Severus decides he needs to go as the emperor to lead the armies of Rome and push back the Goths. Well, the problem was, by the time he got there, instead of going to battle to push back these German Goths, he decided it would be better just to buy their loyalty, just to pay them off. Now, Rome had already been paying off the Alemanni. I mean, like buckets and buckets of gold to keep the Alemanni from invading, to allow them to stay on their side of the Rhine River. And so what does it look like to the Roman Empire that one of their chief gods, when Rome was founded, Remus and Romulus, if you go back and listen to it, one of the principal gods that they believed in was this god Terminus. Specifically with Romulus, Terminus was their god of boundaries or borders, terminal, right? It sounds like he's the god of, and for Romulus, he said, the god Terminus established this as the borders of Rome, and Terminus cannot be moved. So for the Roman mind, however far Rome expanded, it would be an insult to one of their founding chief gods, Terminus, if they ever moved back. And so to the Roman emperor to allow the Germans to have to pay them off to keep the Germans from defeating Terminus was a significant sign of weakness. I mean, think about our political situation today. If we're paying off people that want to, invade the United States or something like that, we would look at our president and say, you've got the biggest, baddest military in the world. Why would you bribe these people not to invade us or not to hurt us financially? Right? Why would you pay off people billions of dollars to keep pumping oil, for example, so that when we've got all this oil ourselves, right? It's just a sign of weakness, and the people and the armies especially saw it. Well, after that had happened, the Sassanid Empire saw that happen, and they began to move against Rome. And so Alexander Severus had to go down and fight this battle, but he absolutely lost. And on the way back to Rome, his own army decided that they were going to assassinate the emperor because of his, perpetual weakness and inability to lead the army. And so this threw the Roman Empire from 235 all the way to 284 into a perpetual series of civil wars. Now think today in the United States about the impact the U.S. Civil War still has today. I mean, we literally just changed the name of a college, like right next door to us, because of lingering effects from the situation in the Civil War. Right? We're still talking about making reparations and equal opportunity and discrimination and things like that. Goes all the way back to, for us, the 1860s. Well, this happened inside of Rome, but the army decided they were going to assassinate Alexander Severus. And in his place rose Maximus Thrax. Maximus Thrax was the general of Legion number 4, and he was the emperor from 235 to 238 AD. And in 238, there was an uprising in northern Africa. This uprising was over the political situation, apparent weakness of Maximus Thrax again. And so what they did is they appointed their own guy, Gordian I, to be the emperor. They appointed Gordian I, who was their ruler, but he was 80 years old, so Gordian's first kind of official act was to look at his son and say, "You are co-emperor with me." And so now Maximus Thrax in Rome sees that the North African part of the empire has said, "Well, you're not our emperor. We've got our own emperor. In fact, 2 emperors." So he leaves from Rome down to head to North Africa to put down this uprising that's going there. Now, at the same time this happens, the Nubians, who are to the west of Egypt, decide, hey, Rome is in turmoil. They've got Maximus Thrax, who just took over because they assassinated their emperor, and now the African part of the Roman Empire just appointed their own emperor. So what are we going to do? We're going to invade. And 20 days into the reign of Gordian II, the Nubians kill the son, Gordian II. And on hearing that, the father, Gordian I, hung himself. So we've got Maximus Thrax, Gordian I, Gordian II. Now at this time, the Roman Empire in the Senate in Italy said, well, Maximus Thrax, he's public enemy number 1 now. So they appointed their own 2 guys, Pupienus and Balbinus, to be the co-emperors. So you've got Maximus Thrax, who left to go to North Africa to put down that uprising. That went away because of the Nubians. And now, while he's gone, the Senate appoints 2 senators, not generals, right? Not strong men, but aristocratic men of, wealth and history. And so Maximus Thrax switches back and starts heading back to Rome, like, y'all can't appoint these 2 senators. Well, the problem is the people at Rome didn't want 2 aristocrats to be their emperor. They wanted strong military guys. The thing that's going on is the boundaries are being pushed back into Rome. And so the history records Pupienus and Balbinus, people were throwing sticks and stones at them while they were walking through, as well as the other senators. Right? Like, think the January 6th insurrection sort of thing, but like everybody in all of Rome, like, you can't go out because it's not safe for you as a senator because of the unpopularity of these 2 guys. So they decide to appoint Gordian III, who's a 13-year-old boy. This is emperor number 6. This is all in 238 AD. The stable Roman Empire with all of this land, all of this wealth, all of this military power hasn't gone a year, and you've got 6 guys who are claiming to be the Roman emperor. So this is pretty bad. Well, in 250 AD, I don't know why I put that apostrophe on the I. Decian becomes the emperor. You probably remember Decian as we talked about the Decian persecution of the Christians. Decius, from 250 to 251, decided the way that he was going to kind of inspire loyalty and unite the Roman people was to turn their affection back to the Roman gods. He declared it mandatory that every Roman citizen publicly worship the pagan Roman gods. And anybody who would not do that, it was a capital crime. And if you did, then you got that libellus. Remember the libellus? It was the paper by which you said that you had offered a sacrifice to the Roman gods. No libellus, you don't buy, you don't sell, you die. Right? Sounds like the mark of the beast almost, right? Like from the book of Revelation. And this was going on in the lives of Christians. So, in addition to focusing the worship on the Roman gods, he made the Christians public enemy number one. He declared an empire-wide persecution on the Jews. No, wait, that was Hitler. On the Christians. Now, this was locally enforced, as we discussed during the time of the Novatians and the Donatists when we covered the Christian perspective of this. But this was going on because Rome was falling apart. And what unites people together more than a common enemy and a common purpose, right? Let's restore the glory of Rome. It's the reason we're falling apart is the pagan gods. No, not everybody is worshiping them. Well, in Alexandria and for much of the African part of Rome, there broke out a plague. It's actually called the Cyprian plague. It's probably smallpox. And because of that, Decian decided to put Cyprian on trial and actually, martyred Cyprian over this. Well, shortly after that, Decius goes out to battle with the Goths. And in 251, he actually dies at the hands of the Goths trying to, defend Rome. So he's got this 1 year of persecution. It's actually 13 months. And after him arises a guy named Valerian. Now, Valerian was both a military general and of senatorial class. So this looked like, the guy. This is the John Kennedy, right? He was a Navy sailor, brave, all that, and a political family class, right? Valerian he's the man. He's going to fix everything. Well, the problem was, at the time Valerian came to power, the eastern side of the empire, this is the side where the Sassanids are, they said, we've already chosen our guy to be emperor. And the legions in the eastern part of the empire appointed their own guy as emperor. At the same time, the Senate declares Valerian as emperor. So Valerian decides, I'm going to go out to the eastern part of the empire and have to go to war against our own people to put down this uprising from this guy who's calling himself emperor when he's really not. Well, interesting that happened was that as Valerian goes out to do this, the generals of the eastern legions kill their emperor and declare their loyalty to Valerian. So now Valerian has everybody on his side, and he says, well, since I'm out here, I might as well just keep going and go push back the Sassanid Empire. Remember, they had taken that region that included Antioch, which was an important Roman city. It was right there at the north, the far eastern end and northern side of the Mediterranean Sea. It was the Palestinian area, right? There's the Phoenician Empire had Tyre right there. It's a hugely important naval port for shipping. So he actually does push back the Sassanid Empire and regain part of Antioch. But at this time, Shapur becomes the emperor who is a vastly superior wartime commander than Valerian was. And so Valerian actually becomes the victim of this war with the Sassanids and is captured at the Battle of Odessa in 260 AD. And at least one account of what happened after that was the former emperor of Rome was made to be the footstool for Shapur, the emperor of the Sassanid. So anytime he wanted to get on his horse, he would order the emperor of Rome to bend down on his hands and knees and step up on his, backside to get on his horse. As he got out of his carriage, he would have him lay down so he could step on his back to, act as a, step to get in and out. And this was the fate of Decius, who persecuted the Christians, died at the hands of the Goths. And now Valerian, who had ordered public persecution of the Christians, is now made the foot. And Christians were not slow to point this out, right? Like when you persecute God's people, this is what happens to you. But the Sassanids had just scored a huge victory over the Romans. They, defeat their legions. They captured several legionary standards. These were these golden eagles that the legion would carry at the front. They were like talismans, right? They were it'd be like somebody taking an American flag or something and running it through, on a upside down or something after they had captured it. Right, showing that they were more powerful. It was the symbol of the legionary power. So the Sassanid Empire problem is still persistent in the eastern part of the empire. And a wealthy businessman by the name of Odenathus decides he's going to take matters into his own hands, and he takes command of the legions that are in the eastern part of the Roman Empire and actually defeats the Sassanids. Pushes them back to the ordinary boundaries between Rome and the Sassanids. But nobody called on him to do this. He just is like, this hurts my business. I'm going to take charge and I'm going to fix it. Well, he dies in 260. His wife, Queen Zenobia, says, well, since we were the ones who, fixed it, this is now our empire, the Palmyrene Empire. This is no longer Rome. I'm the queen. This is my place. You Romans can have, everything that I'm not claiming. And what's Rome going to do? They lost to the people they just defeated. Right? Like, what do you say? Like, okay, I guess, right? Like, so Rome is hurting. Well, out in the west, there was a general named Posthumus who, because of the Alemanni and the Gothics, and the Picts up north in Britain, decides, hey, I'm going to just go ahead and declare this the Gallic Roman Empire. And I'm going to take charge of the Roman legions that are in my area, and I'm going to be their emperor. So in the west, we have the Gallic Roman Empire. In the central part, we've got Rome proper, who, they've got these continually set of generals that get put up as the emperor. By the way, if you didn't know, in the United States, the head of each branch of the military and the head of the military itself must, by default, by definition, be a civilian. The Secretary of the Army, the Secretary of the Navy, the Secretary of Defense overall has to be a civilian. Why do you think that is? Because of what happened in Rome when the generals of the army came to power over the civilian government. This is a lesson from history that goes all the way to our day today. So like when Colin Powell was made Secretary of Defense, he hadn't been out of the army technically long enough, by legal definition, and he kind of had to have a waiver to do that. And remember the zeal that a lot of Americans had about putting this great army general ahead of the armies. Like, what a great idea. Well, history says that's not a great idea. Absolute power corrupts, or power corrupts absolutely, or what is Lord Acton, right? The saying he's got, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, when you're not answering to the civilian government as a military leader, when you are the civilian government, you've got way too much power. So this is the situation going on. We have in Rome, at the end of the third century, we've got this internal division, basically three empires, and we have Romans fighting Romans in ugly, brutal warfare. More than that, we have organized persecution of Christians being one of the tools that the Roman Empire is trying to use to reassert itself as legitimate. right? It must be these Christians. We didn't cover this greatly. Hyperinflation. During Hadrian's time as emperor of Rome, the denarius, the silver coin, was 98% pure silver. By the time we get to the end of the 3rd century, it's less than 0.5% pure silver. So the literal value of money has declined like almost 100%. The guy that's going to come fix it, Diocletian, one of his reforms is he's going to say the denarius must be at least 5% pure silver. Like, that's 10 times better than it was, but it's nothing like 98% like it used to be, back in the good old days in the hundreds AD. And so this is only 100 years, 150 years, right? Like the value of money. In fact, they had gotten to the point where the Roman tax code, instead of collecting denarius as a tax value, they were collecting goats and sheep and chickens and wheat and shoes and cloaks and carriages or swords, whatever you made. And they had this kind of equal value. 10 chickens equaled 1 sword, right? They had, because they couldn't even take their own money. It was that worthless. And how do you trade with other nations when your money is that worthless? So they didn't have Bitcoin, I guess. They had the weakening of the empire and boundary wars. So not only were they internally weak, financially weak, focused on persecuting people for their own legitimacy, specifically Christians, but everybody around them saw that they were weak too. And so that kind of perpetuates it, because now you have to fight wars on all these boundaries because everybody sees that you're, the kind of the declining weak nation. And their cultural identity of being, the iron legions of Rome, this organized, stable government that's blessed by the gods, to perpetuate, is totally lost. There's no confidence in the people that being a Roman is worthwhile. And so from 284 to 305, in 284, Diocletian came to power. And he came to power based on his strength as a military leader. He decided it's not possible for me, the emperor, to be the general on the Sassanid border, the Gothic border, the Alemanni border, the Picts up in Britain. I need to have a co-Augustus with me. We need to divide power equally so that another person with the authority of the emperor can make decisions regarding the legions and the taxes and the people. So when he came to power, he appointed one of his generals that served with him, who was loyal to him, a guy by the name of Maximianus, as the co-Augustus over the western part of the empire. So now we have 2 head dudes. And each of these dudes was going to have a kind of a junior emperor underneath him. They were going to call them Augusti or Augustuses, Augustusums, whatever. 2 Augustuses, and each one has their Caesar, kind of their vice president, if you will. And in the east, Diocletian appointed Galerius. And in the west, he appointed Constantius Chlorus. Well, the problem with this was, one, Galerius was married to Diocletian's daughter. So this was a family and a military appointment. But Constantius Chlorus was married to a woman named Helena, who would later be called Saint Helen, if you've heard that term before. If you've ever been to Rome, where the Spanish Steps are, she was instrumental in that. Well, being married to Helena didn't bring any family loyalty to Maximianus. So they made Constantius divorce his wife Helen and marry the stepdaughter of Maximianus. Let me make sure I got those correct. Yeah, Galerius is married to Diocletian's daughter and forced Constantius to marry Maximianus' stepdaughter. So what we've got now is the tetrarchy. You've probably heard the word monarchy thrown around lately because the Queen of England just died. Well, mono is one. Tetris, the game, Tetris, it's called that because there's 4 blocks, right? Each of the shapes is made up of 4 blocks. So the tetrarchy is 4 archies, right? 4 rulers, 4 chief heads, 4 ultimate sources of authority. So you've got Diocletian, who everybody knows is really number 1, Maximianus, who's supposedly equal with Diocletian, and their 2 subordinates, Constantius and Galerius. So it looks like everything is going to go smooth because these guys, when the Augusti die or whatever, the Caesars can come up. The Caesars have sons. Maximianus has a son, Maximus. Constantius has a son, Constantine. But he was with Helena, not with his new wife, the stepdaughter of Maximianus. So one of the things that bound the empire together was this combination of loyalty between marriage. They were all military generals, and this political unity. This everybody's a Caesar, and when we're going to appoint you, you're going to move up. So be loyal to me, and I'll get you that next great job. And they appoint one of Diocletian's tools for gaining loyalty in the empire was to again enforce pagan worship. One guy defined Diocletian as a pagan fundamentalist, right? He would publicly go make sacrifices. He would he actually tore down Christian buildings that had risen up. He pumped money into restoring pagan temples. So he began using the power of the state to promote this. And another thing that he did was he appealed to a foggy Roman past. He would say things like, remember when we were great back in the 100s and we didn't have these Christians as a problem and everybody was united and we all wanted to be Romans together, and let's go back to that. Let's get back to the heart of the Roman Empire. Let's save the soul of the Roman Empire. But what he was really doing was he was talking about the past different from how the past actually was. He didn't include talking about the things that were there. This is the exact same tactic that Hitler used when he pumped up zeal for the German people, and promoted this idea of remember when Germany was great. And so Diocletian was doing this exact same thing. He was crying out to save the soul of the Roman Empire against these wicked people who are part of our empire. We need to. And that might sound familiar to things you've heard in the news even lately from political rulers in the United States. This is nothing new under the sun, Solomon would say, right? This is a tried and true thing. But what that does is it also pumps up zeal to persecute people that aren't on the side of Diocletian, and on board with his plan. And he did something different, that he claimed that he was superior to everybody else. He was a friend of the gods, almost God. And he would accept the worship of the people. He would allow them to actually worship him. So what did the empire look like under Diocletian? Well, there was the eastern side and the western side, where Diocletian was ruling in the east and Maximus in the west. And they had 2 Caesars that served under them. Diocletian set up his headquarters in the southern part on the Bosphorus. This is the financially richest, the most important military place of the whole Roman Empire. And to the north, Galerius took Thessalonica. He was in prime position to fend off the Gauls that were to the north right there. And on the eastern side, Maximianus, who was the Augustus, he set up his headquarters in Milan. This is going to be extremely important as the eastern and western sides of the church are actually going to split along these political boundaries. Have you ever heard the word diocese? Right? Like you hear this in the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church and the Lutheran Church, right? The bishop is in charge of his diocese. Well, the word diocese comes from Diocletian. It was his division of areas, right? How he divided authority. So Milan is going to be very important because that's going to become the new kind of center. Ambrose of Milan, for example, is going to demand that the Emperor of Rome do public penance for a month outside of his church to be restored to communion with the church, and the emperor does it. Theodosius is his name. This is at the end of the 4th century, right? We're in 305, we're in the 4th century, so within 100 years, the Bishop of Milan is going to exert that kind of power over the Emperor of Rome. So, and then to the north, Constantius is in charge in Trier. And to give you an idea, without reading another section out of Eusebius's church history, empire-wide persecution of Christians was occurring during this time. Here is an artistic representation from the Middle Ages of what was going on. And I'm sure as you look at the painting beginning at left to right, we see a Christian man hanging upside down, hands bound behind his back, being stabbed in the neck. And you're moving to the right. We know these are Christians because of the halos around their heads, right? That shows that they're saints. You see the guy with the stick who's breaking his legs. And then to the right of that, you see another Christian bound on the spit there being roasted alive. And so these were typical persecutions of Christians during this time in the Roman Empire. And you can see the kind of apathetic look of the Romans as they're kind of, talking about the daily events as people are being burned alive right in front of them. Like that was the situation under Diocletian. Diocletian decides in 305 he's going to retire. Now, put this in perspective. 305 is only 20 years from the Council of Nicaea, 325, when the Emperor of Rome calls together all the Christian bishops to discuss a significant heresy in the Christian church. Just 21 years ago, the Twin Towers fell. Imagine a Muslim, I don't even know what the word for bishop would be, right? Like the U.S. president calling together all the shahs of, the Muslim, to discuss Muslim theology and what was going on, right? Like this is a very dramatic, rapid change of heart for the nation in a very short period of time. So turmoil is bound to happen. Well, in 305 AD, Diocletian, his health begins to fade, and he wants to live out his lifelong dream of being a cabbage farmer. And he does. He says, okay, well, I've done enough. I've united these three empires back into one. We've set up this rule of 4. The stability has returned to Rome. We'll just keep killing the Christians, and, Rome will be great. But see, he had another Augustus out in the east, Maximianus. If he retired, Maximianus might say, well, I am now the emperor over all of Rome, and that would undo the reforms that Diocletian had made. So he told Maximianus, you also have to retire. Maximianus will show back up later on in the wars of Carthage, but that's more Roman history and not something we're probably going to visit here. Well, this allows the two Caesars, Galerius and Constantius, to rise to be the co-Augusti. And one would think that Galerius would raise up his son, Maximus, and Constantius would raise up his son, Constantine, to be the Caesar. But they don't. They skip over them. In fact, Maximianus decides he's going to compel Constantius to appoint his own man, Severus, as the Caesar. And so what we've got is now the army is seeing that their generals who they want, Maximus and Constantine, didn't get picked to be the Caesars, and the former Caesars are picking these other dudes that they don't want. So there's conflict again with the army, not happy about the decision of the political rulers. And so what they do is they decide they're going to rebel, and in 306, civil war breaks out. Constantius gets called into Britain to go to battle against the Picts, and he dies in that battle in 306. And the legions that are there unanimously cry out to have Constantine, the son of Constantius and Helena, as the emperor. Now, he wasn't the Caesar. This is him usurping authority that he wasn't legitimately given. Well, at the same time in Rome, Maximus, the son of Maximianus, gets appointed emperor, but there really was a Caesar at the time in the Eastern Empire. So we've got two new people being declared Augusti over the Eastern Emperor. We've got the guy who actually was the Caesar, and we've got the Augusti and the Caesar of the West all going on at the same time. And actually there was a sixth guy in there somehow who declared himself emperor. So it's just like what was happening before the three divisions came about, right? There's this turmoil and this civil war and this craziness going on. Well, Constantine says, I have to go snuff out this Maximus guy. Nobody cares about the Caesar. He's got no real power anyhow. Severus. So Constantine turns south from Britain and begins to march on the capital city of Italy, Rome. Now, Rome is heavily, heavily defended. One of the situations that had happened before this is Rome actually changed their battle tactic to fortify all the individual cities in Rome. So if you invaded the Italian continent, you know, they would just burn all the crops outside the city, and your army couldn't get through the city walls, and they would send a legion around to, you know, kind of picket you and your army because you couldn't get in where the food and the water was, and you couldn't get to the Roman people. It was very effective, but Rome was heavily fortified, and the only way kind of in and out of Rome was through this bridge on the Tiber River. And as Augustus is marching down from Britain to Rome, he apparently has a vision or a dream. The records are not clear, and he gets this word under this sign, conquer, and the sign was either the Chi-Rho or the Stauros. The Chi-Rho is the one on the left. The P-looking symbol is the Greek letter rho. It makes the R sound. And the X symbol is the K. Well, in Christian writing, they wouldn't write Christ. They would put Chi-Rho, and they'd put a line over it. So this became a symbol for the name of Christ, right? In the sign of, or in the banner of Christ, in the name of Christ. The symbol on the right, have you guys seen those t-shirts that say like Jesus or faith? And it kind of has that same shape to it. You know, the letters go sideways like that. Have you seen those shirts? That is the Stauros. Stauros is the Greek word for cross. Tau, rho, Stauros. T is the tau, right? So it actually looks like a person on a cross, right? So you could kind of artistically symbolize the cross of Christ with these two letters kind of superimposed. Both became early Christian symbols of, identifying the Christians. So Constantine gets this sign from God that if he puts this symbol on the shields or the banners of his army, that he will defeat Maximus, who is in Rome, a fortified city. Like Constantine has no real plan for doing this. Well, Constantine tricks Maximus. He sets up his army out of eyesight from Maximus and only presents to Maximus this small-looking force. And, basically calls out to him, you can't, we're going to come in there and we're going to, beat you guys and, making names and all this. And eventually irks Maximus up to the point that Maximus looks across the bridge to the Tiber River and says, we can take those guys. right? It's like a Monty Python movie or something going on here. So Maximus decides to raft across the Tiber River along the bridge with little wooden ships. It's probably a 20-foot or so drop to the ships. And he's going to march his army from inside of Rome, the safety, out to face Constantine. And Constantine springs his trap, and he brings the rest of his legions. And even though Maximus had the fortification and the greater legions, he's limited to fighting on this little bridge. And Maximus gets actually killed in this battle. He's driven off of the bridge onto the wooden boats below, and actually the Romans then lit those boats on fire and burned them, and Maximus dies in that battle. And so now Constantine is the sole emperor of the eastern half of Rome. And he's actually going to move his capital to Constantinople, which is in the eastern part. So he was emperor of the western part, and through, drawing loyalty and political maneuvers. Again, I encourage you to listen to The History of Rome by Mike Duncan to get all the details. Constantine becomes the sole emperor, and Constantine is saying he's a Christian. Look, Terminus, the god, couldn't keep Rome, but as a Christian emperor, I have reunited the empire and brought everything together under my reign. And he has Hagia Sophia built, which is still standing today in Constantinople, Istanbul, or whatever it's called, Byzantium. It's now a mosque. It's got, the minarets built up, but you could still go visit it. And while he's there, he actually attends Christian worship in this Christian church that he had built. This is within 20 years of organized state torture and execution of Christians. Within 20 years. He also declares in 311 the Edict of Milan. If you ever happen to make your way to Rome and you happen to be in the Colosseum, you'll see a placard in the Colosseum from the Edict of Milan, in the stonework, talking about it. And this did not establish Christianity as the formal religion for all of Rome. Rather, it said it is no longer illegal to be a Christian in Rome. But the emperor is a Christian. And so, if he's on that side, then clearly it must be good to be a Christian. Also, if you make it that way to Italy and Rome, you can visit the Vatican. This is a painting of the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. You can see the Milvian Bridge off to the right-hand side. You can see the Roman legions here now have crosses on top of the Roman legion standards, the legionary standards. So, nothing, like when you fly the American flag, right? You don't put any other flag above the American flag. Well, nothing should go above the Roman legion, and here comes Constantine with crosses above the legionary standards. So this is a incredibly significant shift in the political situation for the church that is sometimes called the Constantinization of the church. Constantinization of the church. And today, people argue, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And there is no kind of unanimous consent. As a Congregationalist, I would say it was a very bad thing. As a Roman Catholic or a ecclesiastical, they would say it was a good thing. Presbyterian probably would say it was a good thing that Constantine became a Christian because that allowed Christianity to, spread through the means of the state. As, Congregationalists, I would say that's not the will of God. He wants the state to be the state and the church to be the church. But that's a discussion for a later day. Questions about the political maneuverings and machinations that happened as we get up to. Can you see how important this is to the Christian church? As this, guys are going to be bishops in the Council of Nicaea who are missing eyes or limbs, or broken, disfigured parts of their body because of Roman persecution. And so when that person comes up and says Christianity is real, there's a certain extra kind of weight to their testimony because of what they endured believing what they believed. And to have the state no longer oppose you makes a big difference. So, Diocletian dramatically enforces pagan religions, money appeals, stoked nationalism, elevated himself to almost godness except the worst people. Oh, and Constantine now is supporting Christianity with the money of the state, with the power of the state. So unlike Diocletian, now Constantine is using the state to buoy up Christianity. So there's where we're at. We're getting ready to get back into kind of church history theology-wise, as we're going to talk about the situation at the Council of Nicaea next week, I think, Lord willing. Yes, Brother Billy.
Just a question to clear up. Are the Gauls the forerunners of the Germans?
No, the Gauls are, yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, well, if there's no more questions, we will see you in a half hour as we are blessed to have Crimson River with us today as we are going to open up the Price Library.